The first goal of any intrepid entrepreneur is, how do I replace my job income so I can work full-time on my business income? It's the first real milestone and often the very first challenge an entrepreneur faces when they go and try to start their side hustle. And it can be a big one too, right? Replacing your job income with a side hustle is no easy feat, despite what the internet might be telling you right now. It takes discipline, time management, and well, all the other challenges that come with starting any business is not a side hustle, right? But here's a little secret that most people don't talk about when it comes to creating these side hustles. If you want to replace your income very fast with a side hustle, then don't start one at all. Instead, you should just buy one that's already making money. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today in this video. Let's talk a little bit about why buying a side hustle makes a lot more sense than building one many of the times, depending on your situation. First of all, most side hustles will fail, just like most businesses will fail. A side hustle is technically a business, right? So it is going up against all the same struggles that starting any business from scratch faces. Not because people aren't smart or hardworking, like that's not the reason why they fail, but rather the reason why they fail is a single killer problem that faces every business from day one, the moment they begin. And that problem is called product market fit. You see, you can build the most beautiful website, spend months perfecting your product, but if the market doesn't want what you are selling, you're doomed no matter how much time you spent on it. I've seen entrepreneurs spend well over a year coding an app only to discover nobody actually wants it, right? Product market fit, in my view, is the single hardest thing to starting a business. It's the biggest challenge and is where most people fail. You just don't know what you don't know. You need market data in the form of actual customer feedback. But to get that, you also need actual customers who are paying you actual money, not just friends who tell you how great you are because they're very supportive friends, nor how cool your product idea is. The only votes that count are those that are making revenue for you. Everything else is a fugazi, right? This can be an incredibly difficult thing when starting something from scratch. And people who start a side hustle are in the same exact boat as people who are going, full-fledged into full-time entrepreneurship. From people who are starting a side hustle like a faceless YouTube channel, all the way up to the big boys who are got like a $50 million in funding to go build the next big software e-commerce store. Every entrepreneur faces it, except for one type of entrepreneur. You see, there is a way to skirt around this problem, and you already know what it is, because the person that can skirt around the problem is the entrepreneur that doesn't build a business, but rather buys a side hustle that is already profitable, already making money. When you buy a business that's profitable, you're actually buying time. You see, the seller already spent 2 to 5 years figuring out product market fit, that entire challenge, and you get to skip that directly to the profit. So think about that. Would you rather spend 2 years trying to build a blog that might make you $500 a month, depending on how Google's feeling that day, or buy one tomorrow that's already generating $2,000 a month in profits with room to grow, right? This is the major difference here. The entire calculus of how long it takes to replace your job income goes from one of possible years with you building a side hustle from scratch to one of possible days when you buy a business that's already making money. Now, you might be thinking, this sounds way too good to be true. So what's the catch? Well, there is a catch. The catch is that most people buy the wrong businesses because they don't know what to look for. And that's where we become kind of your secret weapon. You see, unlike other marketplaces where anyone can list anything, we vet every single business that goes on Empire Flipper's marketplace. We reject roughly 94% of businesses out of the hundreds that get submitted to us every single week. And I do mean hundreds. And out of that remaining 6% or so, only a small percentage of those will pass enough of our sniff test to ever make it live on our marketplace for buyers to look at. Now, what does that mean for you? Well, you're not wading through garbage listings or dealing with sellers inflating their numbers like madmen because they don't understand their own value, because sellers usually way overprice themselves, right? Not so when they come onto the Empire Flippers marketplace. So when you deal with Empire Flippers, every business you are looking at has been professionally vetted. And considering we've sold over 2,400 businesses at this point, we've seen a bit of everything when it comes to how to vet a business and the intricacies that goes into that business. So each listing we post shows you exactly how that business makes money, what the growth opportunities are, all kinds of good stuff. And this saves you a crazy amount of time when it comes to deal sourcing. You'll see a lot of people kind of like poo-poo on brokers, like, oh, the best deals are not with brokers. That's wrong, by the way. Like the best deals are wherever you find them. Like it could be with a broker, it could be off market, but a lot of gurus, they'll say that to sell you a course. So just be FYI. One of the things to consider when using a broker, outside of just the fact that you can tap into all this deal sourcing to go find a profitable side hustle. If this is your first time ever buying any kind of business, it is also an incredible safety net for you to use a brokerage like Empire Flippers. You see, even though we get paid by the sellers of our marketplace, our actual repeat customers are not the sellers, it's the buyers. When a seller goes and sells their business, it will often take 2 to 4 years before they have another one really ready to go. That's typical, at least. But buyers, on the other hand, they may end up buying from us multiple times in a single year because they're just acquiring like madmen, right? So our repeat buyers or our repeat customer, I should say, it tends to be more with the buyers. So what that means for you is our incentive is to get the seller a good deal. We want the seller to be happy with the exit, but we also have the incentive to make sure you as the buyer are getting a good deal and you are someone who can really run this business with what you are acquiring. We want you to not only have great success with the business you've acquired from us, but selfishly, we really want you to come back and buy another one, right? And we couldn't do that if we didn't treat our buyers the way we did. So to say all of that, this makes us the most newbie friendly marketplace really in the industry. I don't know anyone who's more newbie friendly than us. In fact, sometimes our sellers say we're too nice to the buyers, right? So this means we know exactly how to help you and how to help you create your own buyer criteria. And speaking of that, let's talk a little bit about your buyer criteria if you are going to seriously go out there and acquire a side hustle. First, we need to talk about your investment range and have a real conversation here. We want to be realistic with what you can do without leveraging your house and life savings and maxing out your credit cards, right? So here is a really good rule of thumb for you when it comes to acquiring a side hustle or really any business up to a certain point is don't invest more than you aren't comfortable with losing. Business is a risky game. Now, buying a business is way less risky than starting one, in my view, and the data kind of supports me on that. But that doesn't mean there's no risk. There is always risk. Business is a game of risk. So you should never go into any kind of acquisition deal where you are afraid of losing your money. Now, speaking of that with leverage, because I mentioned maxing out your credit cards, stuff like that, right? I am not against using leverage, including taking out loans with personal guarantees to go and acquire a business. I think a lot of people, they get fearful with that type of stuff. And I think the fear is a little bit overhyped. It's like once overhyped and underhyped at the same time. So personal guarantee loans to go out and acquire the business, as long as it's the right kind of business, can be a really, really good deal for you. So I'm not poo-pooing on that at all. I think it can be a legitimate path for you to go and acquire a side hustle or even something bigger, right? But you need to be savvy enough to know when to use that leverage carefully. Because though leverage can be an absolutely incredible boon for you in terms of acquisition, ROI, all that kind of stuff, every piece of a debt stack that you add to a business, that you apply to a business, makes that business inherently more vulnerable to market changes, right? So if you're just starting out, I recommend you really focus largely on the capital you already have saved up versus doing any like super fun, highly creative leverage plays with all the different ways of doing financing and lending, right? So for most people starting out looking to buy a side hustle, I would say you'll probably have about $50,000 to $100,000 that you can comfortably use to invest into a side hustle. And yes, there are profitable businesses that exist in this range that can help you replace your job income. Now, a very important thing here, even if you only have, say, $100,000 to put down on a business, that doesn't mean you can only look at businesses valued at $100,000. A $100,000 down payment can actually be very acceptable for businesses who are selling at a $200,000 valuation or even a $300,000 valuation, as long as the deal structure still makes sense for them. So you can still use leverage, right? That's not tied to, say, a personal guarantee or anything like that, but rather tied to seller financing, earnout, all that kind of stuff to get yourself into a much bigger business. Now, the next thing on your criteria you need to decide on is what kind of business model do you want to go and acquire? Are you buying a more passive income business, or are you willing to actively manage something more? So content sites and YouTube channels, they can be much more passive, more hands-off, while e-commerce or service businesses usually require more of daily attention with what's going on with the business. So the more hands-off the business is, often the less potential the business has too. So a content site is often limited by, say, Google SEO for its traffic. A YouTube channel obviously is going to be limited by YouTube's traffic potential typically. So those two models make most of their money typically off of advertising and affiliate marketing, which is fantastic and very, very hands off. You don't have to like handle customer service or do any of that fun stuff. But this also means you're going to be making an overall lower amount of money versus if you actually own the products behind the advertisement, right? Of course, you can always grow these business models to where they no longer are just a content site or a YouTube channel or what have you, but that's a bit of a tough transformation, especially if you're just starting out, you don't fully know what you're doing yet, right? So you like, unless you have a really good plan, I wouldn't go and buy those businesses with the idea you're going to do that unless your plan is pretty solid. Now, another thing is buying what you know. Now, if you've never done affiliate marketing ever in your entire life, then maybe don't buy an affiliate site, especially right now with how the environment is with Google changing all the rules right now. Maybe that's not a good place to buy your first business, right? You should stick to what you ideally already understand and something you are willing to learn very deeply. If you understand the niche well, then it may make sense still to buy an affiliate site or even an e-commerce store without any experience, right? But the key is asking yourself, what do you know? What can you do with the business you're looking to acquire? I like to think of it as what industries am I interested in? What current skills do I have? What kind of lifestyle do I want with my acquisition? And third, so the one of the last parts of your criteria here is defining your growth strategy. Because no business should just be acquired and then you never look at it again. Like that is a foolish thing to do in my view, because if you do that, good chance the business is going to die on you, right? Because you're not paying attention to it. So you want to have a good growth strategy before you go out and buy a side hustle. Are you looking to buy and hold and collect cash flow? Because you could do it that way, but there's a certain type of business you're going to have to buy. Or are you looking to grow a business and flip the business? Because depending on which way you want, whether you want to hold it and collect the cash flow or hold it and grow the cash flow, or buy something to flip for say 2-3 times what you bought it for in a couple of years, that's going to change what you're looking for, right? If you're just looking to collect cash flow and really build up your nest egg that way, then the business you're looking at buying, you might want to buy something that's priced at a premium multiple and acquire something that is far more stable. But because you're acquiring it at that premium multiple and it's more stable, that also tends to mean there's less upside to happen with the business, right? It's already kind of hit a lot of its growth metrics, right? Versus if you're looking to flip something where you acquire it and grow it to sell it for 2 to 3x the price, you might go after businesses that have more problems. And maybe they aren't at a premium multiple. And the reason why is because, hey, there's some stuff you need to like open up this hood and fix this engine a bit, right? So that would be a totally different type of business, right? Now, when it comes to that stuff, if you are brand new to businesses, my number one advice for you when it comes to buying a side hustle is don't buy something you're going to flip. Buy something you can hold and grow, because that gives you a much wider range of businesses you can buy that don't have as many problems. And yes, you will probably spend more money, but the money that you spent is also going to have a much higher chance of return for you if you don't have the skills to fix the business with all the problems. And that kind of goes into my final point here, which is set your minimum requirements of what the business should have already. So I typically recommend not buying anything that has less than 24 months of operational history. And ideally, it should be stable or growing revenue year over year. And ideally, diversify traffic sources. I think as the industry continues to expand and morphs and matures, I think having multiple traffic sources is way safer rather than just milking one traffic source for all it's worth. Now, if your plan is like, you know what, Greg, I'm going to go buy a side hustle so I can flip it and grow it at a like exponential rate to sell it, that's great, but I still wouldn't recommend you going out there and buying something that's declining. Declining businesses year over year declining, except for in specific cases, like say right after the pandemic when everyone started going outside again, so web traffic crash, like I wouldn't recommend buying a falling knife. Maybe you're the guy who knows how to fix it or the girl that knows how to like get in there and like systemize everything and bring it back up to normal. But I wouldn't recommend buying a business that's declining unless there's an obvious caveat as to why it's okay. So for example, there's an agency, a buddy of mine is looking to sell. He had crazy big numbers during the pandemic. He was just getting customers left, right, and center. And now that business has fallen pretty dramatically from where it used to be. Now that business is still really good business, but you would never want to value a business like that based on its previous revenue. Now it's been like about 2-3 years. He's stabled out. So his valuation is really over the last 12 months, last 12, 24 months. where it's been stabilized. So all that like crazy growth he had in the back end, like years ago, is no longer part of the valuation of the company. So there are ways you can go and buy them. Just make sure if you are going to buy a declining business, you know how to fix it. And two, the valuation you're giving that business doesn't include what the revenue used to be, but more like what the revenue is today. And there you have it. Like that's all you really need to go out there and buy a profitable side hustle. Buy something you want to learn about, ideally something you already know a little bit about, and something that is stable or growing in terms of its revenue, that has over 24 months of operational data you can look at. And even if you only have $100,000, well, you can put that as a down payment, and instead of paying 300 grand, maybe you put 100 grand down with another payment in like 3 months, or whatever it is, and you can get yourself into a 300K business that might be making you $10,000 a month in profit before debt service, right? So these are all different ways you can go about and acquire a side hustle. Now, if you're very interested, like, well, where do I find all these things? Well, the answer is very easy. Just go to empireflippers.com/marketplace, register as a buyer, verify your identity, and you can start looking at profitable side hustles today to go out and acquire, which is way less stressful than trying to build one from scratch.